still be the most upfront person.
Okay. I'm usually, but I just got to tip out, so I don't want to be disturbing everybody. I leave it going.
While y'all come in, I did bring some like bags and some water bottles. So if you want to grab a bag and a water bottle, welcome to it. I also have home repair applications because our home repair program is open right now. So I did bring applications right here. If you want to grab one, you need it, your neighbor might need it.
I'm gonna give us a article. Do you want to sit up here, Ms. Marsh? Good morning and welcome to Fraser House. And welcome to the ZWHJCOC Community Outreach Center luncheon. Today, our focus is on providing education around the community land trust. It is something that we felt that was going to be important for landowners and their heirs, because our mission is creating self-sustaining pathways out of poverty, and we're an asset building nonprofit, where we focus on asset building as well as workforce and entrepreneurship. So I've invited the city in to explain community land trust and what you need to know and understand. So Thor's going to introduce himself. At the end of the presentation, we're going to open it for questions, okay? So this is not the beginning, all, and end all. It's just so we can get educated, understand how it's going to affect the community, as well as what we need to do next. Okay, Thor, thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
My name is Thor Erickson, and I work in the Department of Housing and Neighborhood Revitalization. My title is Area Redevelopment Manager. Most of my body of work in housing has been around writing some of the housing policies. The way I write them is I work with residents, collect information from around the country, locally. I wrote the community land trust policy for the city of Dallas. The way I approached it, I used to be the president and managing director of a local nonprofit called Building Community Workshop. Anyone ever hear of BC Workshop? All right. So we are designers of affordable homes, and we were fortunate to work with the Houston Community Land Trust, and we designed some of the homes. And I got to be really familiar with what that process would look like. We did a lot of community engagement in Acres Homes to really understand what the community wanted to see in terms of housing, and then how that would affect our design work. When I left BC, I started my own little practice, and the city hired me to help influence the community land trust policy. It was the first thing I worked on as a consultant for the city. And then COVID happened, and some things changed, and I had interviewed to have a full-time position with housing. So I've been with housing now just over a year as a permanent employee. So I'd like to disclose sort of my relationship with community land trust, both from like an advocate for them, but also from understanding the government regulations and what they are and aren't, and what the city of Dallas is able to do and not. Does that make sense? Cool. So today we're going to talk about some just general frequently asked questions, like what is a community land trust, what is it not? I'm going to go through the eligibility requirements for an organization to be a CLT organization. So first off, a community land trust is an organization who offers housing for sale to income qualified buyers, and they buy the house but not the land. That land is usually not part of the sale price. You're only buying the house. The nonprofit owns the land, and this is how you maintain long-term affordability, because you have a 99-year ground lease. So you rent that land from the nonprofit for 100 years, and you buy the house, and that house doesn't have the cost of land with it. And then the taxes are appraised on how much you bought that house for and how much you're gonna sell it for. There's resale provisions. Because if you wanted to sell that home to someone else, they have to be income qualified as well. So you can only go up so much per year. So this is not necessarily a wealth building model. It is an asset building model to have that home ownership within the family for generation after generation. I'm going to talk about the policy we wrote, because the policy we wrote is not about creating a community land trust organization. It's about having the mechanism so an organization can form, create their board, and then apply to be an organization that has authority to offer community land trust housing in the city. So if you're familiar with the Houston model, there's one organization in Houston that offers this, and the City of Houston City Council blessed that organization with authority to operate. That's the same thing we've done. We've created the outline so an organization can apply. Once that organization has blessing from council, they can go and sell this type of model. Please do jot down any questions you have. We'll take questions at the end, but some of this can be a little technical, some of it can be more sort of policy driven. So I'll do my best to really try to explain that, and I'm happy to go back through all of these sort of details. So I started to answer the first question. A community land trust, technically it's an entity created to acquire and hold land for the purpose of developing and preserving long-term affordability. That's it. So a nonprofit is formed, they build houses, they buy land to build more houses, they sell houses. Those houses are affordable. All of this is online too at DallasHousingPolicy.com, www.DallasHousingPolicy.com. That's the housing website, and there will be a tile that says Community Land Trust. So you'll be able to see the application, all of the rules, this presentation, it's all posted online as well. CLTs became legal in 2012. The state of Texas gave authority that municipalities could allow operation of community land trust organizations in their jurisdictions as long as the council approves it. So this was the state's way of saying, like, we don't know if this is good or bad, we're going to defer down to the municipality. CLTs became legal in Dallas effective December 11th, 2019, when City Council voted to approve this policy. As of today, there are no community land trusts operating in the city of Dallas. Shortly after this, COVID happened, and most of the nonprofits who were interested in this, or would be, shifted their plans to pandemic recovery rather than the long-term affordability stuff. So now that we're seeing some of that recovery come back on, conversations around community land trusts are picking back up, because it is a tool to really protect a community's assets for the long term. Whereas a lot of other affordable housing deals might expire 10 years or 15 or 30, and then they go to the market. This one allows that homeowner to live there forever, have the property taxes go up a little bit each year. How you do it is, you know, it's not too dissimilar to how you develop a normal house, except for you have to have the ability to hold land, have some mechanism in place to support that family. With land pricing in Dallas going up, sometimes it's hard for a nonprofit to not try to recoup that cost. It's hard for them to operate, because they have to, usually when you sell a home, you sell the land as well, you get your money back, you can reinvest. This nonprofit doesn't get their money back from the land. They're gonna hold it. So they have to have enough money in the bank to do that, so they can sell just the property, just the house. Our community land trust program can work with our land bank program, our down payment home assistance program, and just general development. So when nonprofits apply for funding, gap funding for other affordable housing development, they can choose to set aside a certain amount of lots for community land trusts. They're gonna make sure that those are land trust lots as well, and that might get them a couple bonus points on the development application. So we wrote this so that it would work together. The state law says only a nonprofit, 501c3 entity, can operate a land trust. Now, there was just a revision in our last legislation. This now is expanded to also a limited liability corporation that's fully controlled by a nonprofit. So a nonprofit can create a for-profit entity to operate land trusts. Our policy is being amended on September 9th to catch up with the legislation so that both a nonprofit or an LLC owned by a nonprofit can operate a community land trust. We often get asked, well, if in my neighborhood we have a community land trust, are they gonna take my property? Is my property now in that community land trust? And the answer is no. A community land trust does not have the power of eminent domain. They can't take your property, nor can you opt in. You can't say, I'm now in the community land trust, give me a property tax savings. It doesn't work that way. You have to buy the home from the CLT. So in theory, you could sell your home to that nonprofit and buy it back if you met all eligibility requirements. That's a lot of work. And you might not make all the eligibility requirements if you went that model. So this is not about putting your property into a community land trust. It's really about people buying into a community and having this opportunity to have that long-term affordability in place. This would not be the model that every new house in a neighborhood becomes a community land trust property, because there's not a lot of home buyers who want to forego the potential home equity investment that they might get. But this is for a person who wants to live in a place and be committed to that place, but they're not trying to like use real estate as their primary means of wealth development. But that asset over time will appreciate and will be worth quite a bit of money. So this is not necessarily the program for someone to buy a house, flip it, a couple years later, move somewhere else. It's really about investing in that community for the long term. And if that family chooses to buy another home later, they're gonna sell this to another affordable home buyer. So it ensures that there's always a place, a price point for people at the affordable level in a community as that community potentially gentrifies or changes dramatically. This is that tool to get in place early when we know neighborhoods are changing through the market forces, where developers are buying up land aggressively and prices of everything go up. Having community land trust in a place prevents those properties from ever seeing those same increases because they're set on how much they can appreciate here. Does that make sense?
Not really.
Not really? Okay,
No.
We'll come back to it. So in the city of Dallas, we wrote that a community land trust can operate anywhere in the city, like Houston can be anywhere in Houston, or a community can come together. Maybe there's already a community development corporation in place that says, we're now gonna also offer community land trust property in addition to our normal home development or our normal home services. So you can either choose the geography, or a nonprofit can say, we're gonna operate anywhere in the city of Dallas and we're gonna work with local neighborhoods on what makes sense for that neighborhood. All right. The next set of slides get into an organization that wants to apply to be a land trust. So I gave you a lot of information. I'd like to pause and take some questions. You said it didn't really make sense. What is your question?
Well, I'll ask my question at the end because I want to see if you follow up on it.
No, the next set of this application, it really gets into like, what does the application look like? So if you,
Okay,
anybody have
well,
questions
I'll,
on that?
I'll ask my question at the end. So
Okay.
I just want to make sure,
Perfect.
you know, if
Anybody
something, you
have
may click
questions?
later.
Anybody
Okay.
have questions right now? Okay.
Yeah.
So, this is not an application to buy a community land trust home. This is the application for that organization to apply to the city of Dallas to be recognized as an organization to offer community land trusts. So in this, the organization must be a 501c3. I'll update this once we approve our policy to include the LLC component of this. The board of that nonprofit, 1/3 of the members have to come from that community. They can either be people that are buying the community land trust, people who live there on existing boards, but they have to be from the community. And the community land trust organization, when they apply, they're defining what community means. The first C is community, so we have to know what community we're talking about in the community land trust, so we can recognize that the board members are from that community. The governing documents have to say these two things identically. It has to say the purpose is to acquire and hold land for the benefit of developing and preserving long-term affordable housing. And on discontinuance of the organization, identify where assets related to CLT activities will be transferred. There's a chance that nonprofit won't be around for 99 years. We hope it will. Most nonprofits don't reach a 100-year milestone. So when that nonprofit either combines with another one or needs to close shop, it owns land. and it has to transfer that land somewhere. So we want to know what that plan is for its succession plan. Most nonprofits may not be thinking about this. They're like, no, we're gonna make it, we're gonna sustain, this is not a problem. But this requires people to at least have a board discussion to talk about how that would be decided at the time of discontinuance. The staff need to have some expertise or a consultant that they've hired, at least 2 years of real estate development experience, because developing housing is not something you just learn overnight. So we're asking for the staff on that organization or a consultant to have some experience to help that organization develop housing. They have to have a business plan, like what is the operating and revenue and loss projections look like. To apply, I give these presentations about quarterly, usually send out an email to anyone interested, or people reach out to me and say, hey, can we learn about community land trusts? And I love talking about it. So that's the first step. Talk to me, try to understand it, ask me whatever questions you have. Apply for the designation, download the application, start to understand it. But in order to apply, you've had to have formed a board, created a nonprofit, kind of knew what the model was. There is a group called Grounded Solutions Network. They're a national network. They provide technical assistance to communities looking to form nonprofits. They have a membership fee. It's really awesome. And if you go through their program, you satisfy all this criteria, because that group is going to work with that community through all the steps: governance, programming, operations, and it's really the easiest way to go about it. There's a few other individual consultants communities can hire across the country to also walk through all of this stuff. Our application is bare bones what the state legislation requires. We're not asking for anything above and beyond that. All we're saying is, like, meet the state legislation requirements, know who your community is, talk to them, and know how to build houses.
It's called
Grounded Solutions Network. Some of the people that work there have also run and started community land trusts across the country. They're really, really great people. They also offer free sort of seminars, like Q&As on what community land trusts are. And then reapply every year. The resubmittal is just saying, what did you accomplish last year? What are you going to accomplish next year? Everything good? Any major changes, any lawsuits, anything like that that might have come up, just so we're aware of how that business is operating in the city. We ask these questions first on the application. If someone answers no to any of these questions, they're probably not ready to apply for assistance or for approval. Is the CLT a nonprofit? Are at least 1/3 of the board members from the community? Does the CLT have its operating articles? Does the CLT identify the governing documents where the housing or the lots would go? Have you hired a consultant? Do you have a business plan? Do you have your ground lease? Do you have a staff or consultants with that 2 years of experience? Have you filed for bankruptcy in the last 5 years? And did the organization attend a CLT? So those first questions are like the basics, right? Do you have everything ready to go or not? So we try to make it like, if one of these is no, you might not be able to get approval. The bankruptcy one is really looking at the fiscal responsibility of that organization, making sure that they're going to be good stewards of this program and not try to take advantage or mismanage potential funds with a potentially vulnerable population. So the operation questions we ask them, can you give us a narrative on who you are? Who is this organization? What do you guys do? A statement of integrity. What are your lawsuits, legal findings? Are you in good standing? Do you have all of your paperwork filed? How many units would you place in the CLT? And where would this happen? What is the community? The communities part of the application, define the C. What is the community? Describe the engagement activities in that community. This one we want to make sure that you're going to meet your points that you score from this if you've done actual community engagement. If you held one sort of public hearing where you got up and talked at people and then left, it's not really community engagement. But if you really talked to people, walked the neighborhood, understood the concerns, understood like what parcels you have and have that transparency with the community, you'll score well there. Provide a statement outlining the merits and need. Why is a community land trust needed in this place? And how do you know that? Describe how the house design, the physical architecture, meets the criteria of that neighborhood. So have you thought about what the house is going to look like? Have you worked with residents to create architecture that would fit the neighborhood? Last thing I would want to see personally is a bunch of houses that don't look right, that don't really belong. And so the design of the houses is as important as talking to people about what this is and isn't. And if there's a neighborhood plan, did you follow the design guidelines? Because some neighborhoods have design guidelines in the city. Governance is pretty straightforward. How was your board recruited? Who are they? Who are the third from the community? What do they do? The ground lease. So the city has a ground lease that we have worked with Grounded Solutions to make right for the city of Dallas. Grounded Solutions has a ground lease and all the exhibits you need that will be recognized by any mortgage company that offer products to community land trust buyers. If an organization wants to create their own legal documents, there's a good chance a bank will not accept them because they can't guarantee that it meets the national standards. And that Grounded Solutions has worked for the last 40 years or so to develop understanding to support this model across the country. So really utilizing the standard templates that are out there that have been verified by multiple attorneys and financial institutions is the best thing for a community land trust organization. And the city will accept them right away because we already know that they meet all of the conditions of our state government and our local policy. For the financial section, we're looking at the business plan of the organization, including bank references. We just want to understand how that organization operates. If it's a new organization, the business plan, but if it's an existing organization, the 990 will come with this, which is the tax filing that a nonprofit files yearly to publicly disclose their finances. And then programmatic activity. Many community land trusts across the country offer additional services in addition to selling homes. They might help with legal assistance, they might help with landscaping, they might help with rainy day home repair emergency funds, they might offer babysitting, they might offer small business support. So community land trust organizations, as they're most often part of a community development corporation or community-based organization, offer all of these other services. So we want to know what other activities or support is this organization potentially providing to residents in the community. And then we want to understand how this community land trust is dedicated to anti-displacement in addition to this. Because we don't want to see community land trusts operating and part of their business model is to buy a bunch of property, see a whole bunch of market rate homes, and they set aside a couple for community land trusts. That's not necessarily anti-displacement because the market rate homes might be too many, they might raise property taxes everywhere around, and we might see other displacement, but they've saved a couple lots. So we really want to understand the business model of the community land trust organization to make sure it has the community's benefit in mind for that long-term vision. And that's not to say that no market rate homes can be built, but there needs to be a discussion on what that balance is and how are we working with residents to protect them when development comes. That's kind of it. Yes, ma'am.
What organizations do you have in Dallas? What community land trusts are there in Dallas?
There are none at this time.
None.
No. There have been some nonprofits that have started this. They have boards, they may be altering their bylaws to offer this as one of their services. But many of them that were involved in these conversations and getting ready to do this was really at the start of the pandemic. And then as COVID happened, priorities just have shifted. And then of course we had the winter storm. And so our nonprofits that serve in the housing space really have like shifted what they focus on. But I have conversations again with many communities that are interested again in starting to apply for their designation.
Where are they?
They're all over the city.
Can you tell?
Now, at this time, it's more of like until they actually decide to move forward, it's not my place to share their conversations with their communities. That'd be understanding.
I'm gonna ask the same question a different way. How many applications have been received to date for COT?
Oh, 0.
Okay,
And no one has come through with their first application.
okay, fine. What has been the reception and the perception of COT by organizations like Habitat for Humanity?
I can't speak to how Habitat receives it because I'm not a spokesperson for them, but the nonprofits who attended generally support community land trusts. People are worried about the wealth building asset primarily versus the idea that a home isn't necessarily always that, right? So that's our big conversation in community. When you buy a house, it's going to appraise yearly. If that market in that neighborhood goes up the way it has been, property taxes go up and up, and a lot of times people can't afford it.
Right.
Community land trust takes that problem off the table, but it limits the amount of wealth someone could get from that house if they were to sell it, because they gotta sell it to an affordable home buyer. But the purpose of buying a CLT home is to invest in that community for the long term, not sell it in the short. And that doesn't mean that they can't sell it in year 2 or 3 if their life changes or something happens. They're just limited on how much money they can make each year to make sure that those property taxes remain affordable for the long term.
So even though the homeowner doesn't own the land, they're still going to pay property taxes on the land?
They pay property taxes on the improvement. Everybody pays taxes on the value of your house and the value of your land. And those two things are combined. And you will still pay property taxes on the land, but that land is being valued at $0, or if you pay a stewardship fee to the nonprofit, if you pay $10 a month, you're valuing that land at $120. So you're gonna be taxed on $120 versus if that lot was valued at $50,000 and you're paying property taxes at $50,000. So, and the home, if you bought it for $200,000 and your resale formula says every year I can sell it for 2% more than I bought it, you're only paying property taxes are going up 2% a year, while the rest of the neighborhood may be going up by 15 or 20%.
But when you get ready to sell your house, if you don't own the land, then what's the resolution for that?
Well, you're selling it to another income qualified buyer who's buying into the community land trust. So it just starts that cycle over again with a new family. And that's how you maintain long-term affordability, is the next heir or buyer has to meet the initial qualifications, and that 99-year ground lease starts all over again at that time. So that property is always an affordable unit in the neighborhood.
Now, when the COT is formed, do they purchase the lots from the city of Dallas?
They can. So our land bank program is one way they can purchase lots. They can also get a bank to invest in them, to buy lots that are more expensive, private lots. They might work with homeowners who are elderly that might want to deed excess lots or homes to them. So the way a nonprofit acquires land can be multiple ways. Yes, sir.
So in other words, you have to be a nonprofit for this program, first thing. The second thing is we can't procure any equity in the home.
You get equity, but it's less than what the market would allow.
So in other words, now that this nonprofit procures this land and they can actually get it at an affordable rate, and say for instance gentrification happens and that whole neighborhood gets bigger, and it's more expensive, you're not paying that most expensive rate.
Exactly.
But that could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing
But you're
too.
not going to recoup the potential value of that sale
Right.
in the boom.
Right. So in other words, my neighborhood goes up. Okay, my neighborhood goes up, and where I was paying maybe $300 on taxes at one point a year for my home, now everybody else is paying like say $600. It done double. Everybody's paying $600. I'm still paying $300.
Exactly.
But also too, I can't sell this home to anybody else but another person that has this same thing. this, you know, so it's still a loss for me. I'm looking at it.
Yeah, that is the biggest conversation around community land trust. Is this the best thing for an individual or not? And it might be right for some people, it might not be right for everyone, right? I mean, that's just something to acknowledge. When you buy a community land trust house, you are forgiving the potential maximum equity that home could get when that neighborhood is changing. But many advocates of community land trusts will say, well, we're advocating for our community. We have generations of people who live here. We want to make sure that culture can stay here. And the way to do it is this, but you're forgiving, you're releasing some potential wealth generation from that.
So this has to do with generational wealth.
And when you're right, this is
This-
about
this-
a
this-
generational asset,
Yeah,
not about
okay.
wealth building. Because if you're gonna sell that home for a lot of money when the market changes and leave, well, you're most likely not selling it to a family member, right? You're gonna sell it to whoever the buyer is that's giving you the most money. And so that's the conversation to be had in terms of when a nonprofit operates community land trust land in a neighborhood, they aren't trying to con anyone out of this. And that conversation is always at the forefront of this decision because it's a big personal decision. A lot of community land trust home buyers are first-time home buyers. They aren't ready to pay full property taxes. They need a little bit of help with that for 5 or 10 years. After that mark where they might have saved a little bit, they can go buy in the market to whatever they can afford at that time. And then
That
the
home they
stays
have
the
to
same.
sell to someone else.
And they'll be able to make some money off of it because every year that home will appreciate at the negotiated resale formula. So 2% a year, 2% a year, and they can sell it at that maximum price. I think, I'll come back to you, I wanna make sure we get everything. I think her hand was up and then.
So, actually, we have a community land share thing. You buy a house there, you're paying for your house and you're paying leasing on the land, that's
Yes.
how they make money.
Well, no
if
one's making,
you,
so the nonprofit is not making any money.
Well,
off of
they
this.
can make money, they just can't show a profit.
Well, yeah, I mean, nonprofit can make surplus, but they're not making any money off that ground lease because typically the ground lease comes with something. A lot of that ground lease money goes into an escrow account for the homeowner. So the nonprofit puts it in the bank to help that homeowner out later if they had a rainy day fund. The nonprofit can't make any money off of it because the more money you charge for the ground lease, the more property taxes the homeowner has to pay on it. And at some point in there, you're paying what the market already is, and the financial savings just isn't there. Come right back to you.
Yeah, can you talk some more about the formula on, the increase in the sales price?
A typical one is 2% yearly. But there's a lot of them. Ground to Solution has 3 different formulas, I think. If you go to the Ground to Solutions Network website, you can see, it's very technical, so I try not to get into that math too much in these conversations because there's so many variables to them. One looks at future appreciation and a percent of appreciation. One is just a standard 2%. And so there's just different ways a community can be thinking about what the potential future models will look like and then take a percentage of that up or down to have those changes.
So it's not locked in, is that something that's
It's locked in.
negotiable or something that the community land trust can decide to give these different options?
Yes, it is. And most of them pick one and stick with it because then it's just the same for everyone. I do think that there's a couple of community land trusts that might offer a couple different options depending on the financial situation of the person and what makes the most sense for them. But a lot of it is how sophisticated is the organization going to be to have different financial models for each person. And most nonprofit home developers have one model. They stick with it. It's easy. It's applied. All right, I
And so
think
the lease, the other thing, on the lease of the land, it's always 99 years?
it is.
Okay.
That's the maximum amount of time a lease can happen. And then at 99 years, there's typically, it'll automatically renew. One of the things we've been talking about is if you're 18 in Texas and you buy a house, community land trust, and you make it all the way to where you have grandkids and you deed that home to those grandkids and that starts to just happen, Or maybe you just reach until you are 99 years old, right? And you've extended the whole lease. Like, what do you do? Well, I mean, the chances of someone making it to the end of 99 years is so slim, but we've just said celebrate them. Just like let the home be sold for whatever that family can make because they made it through the end of a 99-year lease. But every time that home is sold or transferred through deed or heirship, the 99-year lease starts again. So it's very unlikely a person would ever actually satisfy the 99-year lease requirements unless they bought right when they were legally allowed and just had really great health throughout their whole. I'm gonna come back here and then we'll go back here.
Okay, if you only have land, what do you do in the land in the community, CLT?
There's nothing you can do if you own just a parcel of land. If you wanted to sell that land to the nonprofit to develop it, you could. And the nonprofit would pay you whatever, your negotiated rate of that land was. As an individual, you can't develop your own lot and offer this as a CLT because the first thing you have to do is be a nonprofit organization offering community land trust property in the city of Dallas.
Of the nonprofits that expressed interest in CLT, understanding no one has submitted an application, are there any black or brown ones in that number that you know of? Majority black or brown?
It's 100%.
100% black or brown?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you say this property, are we speaking, if I was to have my nonprofit and I bought a house, okay, under this program, I can only buy one, or could I buy two or three?
You can only buy one because you're buying it to be your primary homestead.
So it would have to be my primary homestead. So in other words, I couldn't take it and then and rent it out or anything like
Now,
that.
I on purpose wrote into our policy, excuse me, that we would allow ADUs on these.
Allow what?
ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, another ensuite in the back, or an ability to have rental income into this. A lot of nonprofits across the country do not allow ADUs because they want you just to buy the home. But we have to do better than that. We have to allow people to earn income in their home as well as make it their primary homestead. So if both of those are legal in Dallas, then we should allow that here. So this policy allows an organization to sell a home with an ADU, that family can say, I'm also gonna rent that ADU out to earn income to help me pay my mortgage on my primary homestead.
Okay, the reason I asked that question is because, I mean, you say a home. What if it's in a a unit, like 4-unit place? I couldn't buy a whole or duplex or something like that because I have a nonprofit, and my nonprofit is specifically to help people in need that need a home. I couldn't use it for that.
So this community land trust model is for the sake of single family style homes. Now, there is a provision in here if the nonprofit was going to build multifamily structures for rent.
Yes.
They can do that.
Okay.
There's no tax savings right now on rental property in a community land trust because if an organization already owns multifamily property, they can charge whatever rent they want. They don't have to charge market rate. That's something they're choosing to do. And there's already a process with our Dallas County Appraisal District that allows you to say, I'm renting this to low-income people, appraise my property different. So community land trust provision doesn't help out the nonprofit in that regard. You already can do that. In terms of duplexes, this policy in the state says it has to be for single-family home ownership opportunities. That's being challenged by some lawyers to try to encourage better density. But until it happens at the state, we can't go further than the state legally allows. Yes.
You mentioned Houston and that they have implemented the CLT. Can you give us an example of a locale that's done it long enough so that you can speak to us about controlling gentrification, long-term effect? It's not enough to tell me Houston is doing it. I would rather hear that over the last 30 or 40 years, this community that did it, what we saw was, do you have that kind of data?
Yeah, so Guadalupe Neighborhood Association in Austin is another local example. No one's controlling gentrification through this because this is only what a nonprofit can acquire at a certain time. And nonprofits are limited in how much money property, they just have to go out and buy land. This is where having our financial institutions really support this model and help them acquire land that they can like write off and not have to recoup any money on is gonna need to happen. But Guadalupe has been able to have community land trust and rental properties and all of the things that you'd want to see a community development corporation do. And while the surrounding areas of it have gone up like 600% over the last 20 years, their community land trusts remain affordable. So that's Guadalupe Neighborhood Association. All of their data and everything's on their website. We brought the ED here a couple times. He's spoken to many of the community development corporations in Dallas around like how that operates. He's pretty accessible if you have questions about, and the staff is really great if you have questions about how that works. Another really great national example is the Dudley Street Initiative in Boston. They're probably one of the larger community land trusts in the city. Dudley Street was unique. Boston in the 80s was seeing just a bunch of crime and a whole bunch of things that you just don't want to see. And the city granted them the power of eminent domain, which is just unheard of for a community organization to have that power. So Dudley Street was able to secure a whole bunch of land, and they put it all into a community land trust over time. And that's just a national example of a really large organization working with the community, can control that community and help residents be able to stay there long term. But the market pressures of gentrification are real. There's very little that can be done when someone can buy private property and build a house or apartments and charge what they want, right? If someone's willing to buy it, they're gonna sell it for that. So that's just something that's the way our capitalist society works, the way private property and development works in every American city. Programs like this help curb some of that, but not all of it. And it's limited to how successful or how sophisticated that nonprofit can be in a place that they know is gonna see gentrification and drastic market rate increases, to secure property before it happens and get ahead of that curve to get development started, to secure affordable housing for some residents in that space.
I'm just struggling with one last thing.
Sure.
I'm trying to wrap my mind around why a traditional CDC or CHODO would want CLT. I'm having a hard time making that connection, if you could help me there.
It's the long-term aspect, because the CDC buys a lot, gets funding to develop an affordable home, and then that's it. They're done with that transaction, unless they're providing some other services to that family. That family in 5 years now sells that home because the market went up 100%. They're gone. That house is now lost forever to the community to be something potentially affordable to keep someone else who might be in the community struggling in the community. So a CDC that wants to help on this, one of the other things they do with the CLT is they will help that family find another buyer, or they'll buy it back from the family if they're financially able to, and then resell it to another person. So they have a vested interest in keeping affordable housing in that neighborhood. That's why
Can
they
you
do
be
it.
a CHODO or a CDC who participates in CLT, or must you rewrite your whole?
No, it can just be a few of your lots, because a buyer for this is also limited, right? Educating buyers around what this is, in a market that's never seen it, the first people in is the hardest, right? That's where, like, in the 60s, where this started in Georgia with farm worker rights, black farmers were not able to get mortgages to invest in their own properties, band together and put all their land in a communal land trust at that time to like help each other out. Shared goods, shared services, started to work together, and it formed this idea that a community come together and use the land for the community's intended purposes, and then make sure that that was available for future generations. Fast forward that, it's now just about home ownership. It lost that communal mentality, but it maintains that integrity of community, controlling what's best for a community, as much as it can control in a very crazy environment of development. Yes, sir. Now come to my red next.
You said that, if you bought a house in the CLT and then you got ready to sell it, you had to sell it to someone else who qualified. But then you also said that if you bought a house and your grandkids, you don't leave for heirs, do they have to qualify?
They would. So, well, if you air it down, they meet the criteria. They don't have to income qualify at that time. Because the city has no interest, the city has no lien on this, the city has no funding in this. So if you deed it onto your family member, you work with a nonprofit to rewrite that ground lease with the new homeowners, and that's it. Right over there.
Okay, so I missed out on a whole lot. What you said, so I was wondering, do we get any copies of the slides?
So at DallasHousingPolicy.com, our website, you can click on the Community Land Trust tile. This presentation, as well as the full application for nonprofits, is available to download. So all of this is available that way. The copies I printed over here are my home repair applications. I do want to speak to that here as well, but I didn't try to waste paper to print out a whole bunch of presentations. So that's okay.
Can you repeat the site?
Yeah, www.DallasHousingPolicy.com.
But is there some,
Yes.
Do you have to have new houses?
No, so a
Oh, like-
nonprofit
like
can
in-
buy existing houses,
like
and
in
then
the
as long as it
neighborhood,
meets
yeah.
code, they can resell that home that exists.
It's an old house.
If a nonprofit bought that old house and it was livable, they could sell it, absolutely. They have to, they'll be able to acquire property or land. It's harder sometimes for a nonprofit to buy a house and renovate it and then sell it, because the cost of renovation might not be what they can sell it for, depending on how bad of shape it's in.
Right.
Sometimes it's easier to control costs for just new development, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. Yeah.
I lied. This is my last question.
You can ask, you don't have to tell me how many questions you have.
I'm trying to figure out why Fraser House would invite you to give this presentation based on how it was marketed. So now I'm trying to connect the dots between you, and you did an excellent job, but I'm trying to figure out why they would have invited you to just give the presentation to normal, everyday residents in this community.
I can't speak to that. So I was on a call a couple months back with UT law students who were talking about CLTs. They did not invite me to be a guest speaker, but they talked about our local policy, so I chimed up in chat. Like, hey everyone, I wrote the Dallas policy. If you have any questions or want me to give you a presentation, let me know. And they reached out to me to give this presentation. Their plans are not to talk to them, because haven't had any conversations. This is our first conversation. My first time ever in Fraser House.
There's some disconnects, so hopefully they'll reach out to those of us who attended and we can give them some feedback.
Sure, I think they're gonna come up with a survey, is what I was told, but, yeah, I mean, just, this is my job. When somebody wants to talk about community land trust or home repair, I show up.
You did an excellent job. You did an excellent job, an excellent job.
Well, let me divert real quick, so, I'll answer your question. So our home improvement preservation program
Yeah.
is our
Talk
home
about
repair
that.
program. You're gonna make 80% of AMI or below. On the application, it says that a family of 4 household size is 71,000, a family of 1 is like 50,000. I have applications here. In order to apply, there's a checklist on there. Get all of the checklist items, fill out that application, sign it, and then take it to one of the 4 libraries, Bachman Lake, Pleasant Grove, MLK, or Hampton, Illinois, on September 11th from 9 to 1. I will encourage you, if this is something you need or a family member needs, to apply early. Be there as early as you can. We have limited funding. We get about 500 applications a year. We have money to serve about 40 people. We process applications in the order received. Yes, ma'am. Question?
My daughter lives in the house,
Okay.
but I live in another house.
All right.
I'm not renting it to her.
Who owns
Can
it?
she? I do.
No. It has to be the home you live in. This is for homeowners.
Okay.
And I know you're the homeowner, but it has to be your homestead. It has to be the house you live in, your primary residence.
Oh.
You can own multiple properties.
Yes.
You don't have to tell me, you just have to tell me where you live, like. fill that
Okay,
out. Fill that out.
I can fill this out, but
Yeah, if it's not your primary home,
No.
like, this is for people who live in that home and need that assistance. Let me get back to this guy real quick. Okay.
Okay, I guess my question, I mean, it sounds like a very interesting program, the CLT, but, and I'm not a doubtful Thomas, but where do we have the data that would support, the need for this particular product? I'm basing that strictly on the amount of movement that you have with people, now versus, say, 25 years ago. People bought a house, moved in it, eventually they paid for it, but you look at the younger generation now,
Yeah.
where you have a lot more liquid, fluid people, they go where the jobs are, or whatever.
For sure.
And then once they normally reach a specific level of income or whatever, then they wanna move up with the Joneses.
This is a really good point. There's two ways to look at the data. There's movability trends, which you touched upon, and then there's community trends. While millennials and Gen Y in their teens and 20s move around, our millennials are now 30 and 40 years old. And they've done their moving around. They start to want to be homeowners now because they didn't earn income earlier in life, so they couldn't. Now that they start to have established careers, they're getting to a place where they can. And many of them are looking to move back to cities. Some of them are looking at the suburbs who have citified, right? Like, Richardson, Addison are pretty urban environments for being suburban municipalities. And there's a price point that they can buy. This program didn't say this community needs this. This program says this is a policy that has worked in other areas around the country. It's legal in Texas. I want to let communities have these conversations and see if this is part of their toolkit in order to work on their community. If it is great. If it's not, that's okay too, right? It's one of many tools, but not giving that choice and not giving the opportunity to discuss it would not be fair to a community who might be marketing themselves to the kids of generations who live there to come back and here's a product for them. So there's a way to think about what that community was, is, and could be, and how this could fit in or not. So that's why I'm all about choice. If I can give you multiple avenues, then you can make that choice as long as you have enough informed information about it. Yes? And then right now, you're next.
Well, maybe I've lost my train of thought. So let me just, from everything that I've heard, could this be a benefit for homeowners who live in a community, whose community that is vulnerable to gentrification? And if a nonprofit is considering a CLT, that somehow this could assist them with remaining in that community? Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it in that way. And so the question I know she had about maybe the purpose of you presenting to people, I don't know anybody who's a part of a nonprofit organization or just a homeowner such as myself. But maybe, I mean, I'm just thinking maybe one of the reasons why you could be here, that, because you see what's kind of going on in the city about within the last 10 years, and it is very aggressive, because I'm seeing a lot of people being displaced because they're no longer interested. I mean, they're no longer able to afford to live in their community and want to remain in their community. This could be a way. Also, is this only for existing nonprofit?
No, a new nonprofit can be formed
For the purpose
sake
of this?
for the purpose.
Yeah, because I know everybody here, I'm sure you're witnessing, especially if you live in the city of Dallas and anywhere close to Deep Ellum or downtown.
I live just over at Buckner Terrace, so. not
Yeah,
too far from
you
here.
see, what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's so much not maybe a rough building too, but,
Yeah, there's some wealth that's built, it's just not at the same rate as it
Yeah.
would be if you bought a market rate home.
and maybe there's not, an interest in, maybe there's more at stake for people other than just building wealth than, remaining. I think if you can look at it as just a quality of life, yeah.
You're buying back into a community
Yeah.
just who you believe in. It's a long-term idea, rather than I'm gonna buy a house here for now. There's a different mindset of a person who buys this product and what that place means to them.
And And I think sometimes we have to look and be realistic about, you know, depends on how old you are and, what you're capable of when you're thinking about building wealth. Because I've seen people who maybe sold their home for 300 something plus thousand, but still, you wouldn't even be able to buy a home in the city of Dallas for that amount of money.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, like Houston, I mean, they wrote off their land and they have a really modest home, a little 2-bedroom that starts for like 74,000. Their 3-bed, 2-bath are like right around 110 because they're not counting the land price in there. So the initial price point for a modest sized house is much lower. Now we've seen significant surge pricing with COVID, but a normalized market is back around that price.
Yes, on the home repair, program, have you all extended the warranty time if you have any problems? They did a great job on my house, but after the warranty, I had a problem with my gas pump.
So that warranty is with the contractor directly, and there's no probably extension of that warranty with the contractor, unfortunately.
Right, because there was nobody that could come and fix it.
Right.
I thank God my house didn't explode
Absolutely.
because it was gas. But you all could put something or change something, I mean, because the contractor, he's no longer working under the city program.
Yeah, but is the warranty still valid? They're just not the contractor's out of business?
No, it's not valid. That's why I'm saying, have you all extended it?
No, we're not. We don't extend, we can't force the contractors to extend their warranties. Their warranties are what they can get on those products. That's what we do on. But let me talk to you offline to understand your house a little bit more so I can look into it.
The gentleman who asked you the last question,
This guy over here? Yeah.
and your response answers my question as to why Fraser House would have invited you here to speak to members of community. Unfortunately, in my opinion, it wasn't marketed well or explained well, and I gave that feedback on this form. It's revolutionary what you're talking about because it is counterintuitive with regards to capitalism. It takes us back to a time in our country where we just had different kinds of priorities. And I'm not a millennial, but if I were, it's kind of freaking exciting to think that you could have that kind of power to put your footprint on an entire community beyond just your own personal wealth, but really be able to literally be your own version of Martin Luther King and have that kind of legacy. It's phenomenal. And so I'm hoping that they will take my feedback, call on me. I would love to be a part of pushing it and supporting it. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, of all the policies I get to work on, I mean, this one is just so cool to me. Like, it's just different, right? It's not gonna save the world, it's not gonna change 1,000 people's lives, but the people who will be able to take advantage of this, it's just completely different. I saw this hand, then back here, and then back here. I promise I won't.
Okay.
Your information, where you can contact you directly over there on those inboxes?
No, and I left all my cards, but let's see what I got. No, that's it. THOR dot Erickson, ERICKSON. So Thor, THOR dot Erickson, ERICKSON at DallasCityHall.com. Also, if there's any water bottles left in this bag or blue bags, you guys are welcome to them. I brought a little bit of swag, don't have a whole lot, but please don't make me take those back to the office. CKSON. And, yes, sir.
I was just, a lot of people talk about the wealth side of it. You know, some people do sell their homes and make money from them, but a lot of people don't. There's a lot of people out there that lose their home. If you look on the tax roll, there's a lot of folk out there that's losing their home because they're not paying taxes. And families are losing homes because their parents paid taxes for all these years. Then it came to the kids. They didn't live there or didn't want to live there or couldn't afford to live there. They didn't pay the tax, they lose the property.
And that's where a nonprofit can step in,
Right.
get that property back, and sell it to a family who's ready for it.
Right. And so even though we're not necessarily representing nonprofits, nonprofits are started by individuals like us. So that, I mean, it's still good information, even though we might not be able to go tomorrow and start something, because we don't have a nonprofit.
Many people freak out about
Individuals
losing
start
wealth, right?
nonprofit.
And so, you know, the future projections that you're talking about are unknown. Right. Right? And so that's just a really big part of it.
I was just curious, how was this proposed? Why did the city of Dallas, take this upon themselves to make it?
You know, I don't know, and that's a straightforward answer. This was being worked on in the city before I joined. I was with a nonprofit here locally, and then when I started my own practice, the city asked me to consult with them on this policy. So the Housing Committee and Housing Policy Task Force had made a decision that they wanted to advance this policy as part of the Comprehensive Housing Policy. So I was brought on, I finished it up, I wrote the policy, presented it to the council, got it approved in order to create this. But in terms of like who made the decision or how long have they been talking about it, I can't really answer that. But it was part of the Comprehensive Housing Policy that was passed in 2018 as one of the many initiatives that the Housing Department has to create affordable housing in the city.
So, let me ask, are you still with what was the nonprofit?
It was with BC Workshop. No, I work full-time with the city of Dallas now. I'm an area redevelopment manager. I really oversee all of the home repair programs. But this was the first thing I worked on for the city, just in a slightly different
One more, just, are you guys working on any other program? I know you said this is not an answer to identification. Are there any other things that in your work to kind of assist individuals with what's happening throughout the city of Dallas?
That's such a broad question, but yeah, if you email me, I'll make sure you get the Housing Policy Task Force emails, and you could join a meeting if you're able to. At those Housing Policy Task Force meetings, we talk about upcoming policy, what we're working on. We listen to residents and like what current needs are to make sure that we fully understand that and either have someone work on it or we'll acknowledge if we don't.
One more question. Now, I know there's families who own property in, especially in Southern Dallas for years and years and years. And they put it, and I don't know what the terminology, but they put it in some type of trust. Now, they may live in other places, other cities. Do you know exactly what that vehicle is?
Might be a family trust.
Okay.
The property, the assets are managed by a company.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
On your home improvement, what type of home improvement do you have?
It's a major rehab. It touches every element of the house, from the roof to the foundation, everything in and exterior. It's a forgivable loan up to $50,000 worth of work. If that home, when we inspect it, needs more than $50,000 of work, and that price is greater than 80% of the value, we might have a conversation with you about reconstructing it, tearing it down and rebuilding it. We do less than 10 of those a year. We do about 30 to 40 rehabs a year to manage the $3 million that we have. So not everybody gets a reconstruction. You can't apply for it. You got to use that application so we can assess the house first and then write up a scope of work. If you have a wish list of things that need to be done, we can take that into consideration, but we will focus on code and structural integrity of the home first as priorities to make sure that that structure is livable. And then if there's money left over, we'll maximize the $50,000.
So it's a loan.
It's a forgivable loan. You don't pay any payments on it. It's a 10-year lien. As long as you live there, you don't owe anything back to the city.
What if you die before 10 years?
Your heir, hopefully have a will, inherited to someone, will need to assume that loan. If they're income qualified, they can just assume it. If they make more than 80%, you would have to pay back the portion that's due. So it's forgivable 1/10 for every 10 years. So if it's $50,000, 1/10 of that is forgiven every year. Year 10, it'd be a small portion that someone needs to pay back. That's only if they're not income qualified when they assume it. You can also sell the home during that period, and you got to pay at the sale price. You got to pay that portion back to the city. Working on changes to that. It's not something that's fast. I only moved the city a year. That one's a lot more conversations in order to see if that could be changed.
And that's for owner.
Hopefully by the end of the year, you might see some improvement on that.
It's only for owner, primary residence.
Yes. All right.
I don't plan on.
I think that's my time. I need to get your number. If you could write that down for me.
Oh, I have one question. I don't know if you know the name. You mentioned the Black Farmers Group in Georgia. Do you remember their name?
It's eluding me right now.
Okay.
Okay,
And,
give me your number.
I will look it up real quick.
What's your
Because
number?